how they access different digital services. So I spent a lot of my time appreciating the challenges they faced. And also, earlier this year, the International Labour Organization trained me and provided me certification to conduct what they call gender audits. So essentially what that means, I come to an organization, I talk to some of the staff, I review your policies, and I start to give a reflection in terms of to what extent your policies equal for women and men. And so I'm kind of, for this presentation, I'm combining a lot of experience and some of the findings we've had when we've had conversations like this in the field. So there's really no better place to start than to ask the so what question. So many times we rush to go into digital innovation and let's report about this. And oftentimes I like us to pause and ask, to what end is this? You know, like, okay, there's this fancy app that's out there, but what is it really delivering to the person? And I think Tabu set a very good conversation in the morning around accountability. So it's no different. And I think one of the key say, when you're encountering a situation where, for example, I did read some of the government reports in the outset of COVID, and one paragraph that I liked the most, or quote, was where they were saying that despite the fact that COVID and the pandemic has accelerated digitization, it has also widened the gap, especially because not everyone had the same, say, skills or tools to work with during the pandemic to cope with the sudden digitization. A key item I saw, one example I saw was at Kololo, there is that office where you either apply for a national ID or personally, I was there because I was trying to register birth for my child. And I remember going there the first time and being told that there's a system online where you book. Sorry? Yeah, you book an appointment. And that seemed like a simple process for most of us in the room. But I could see the challenges it posed because there was a queue at the entrance to the airstrip because many people were already struggling with that barrier that was already put, that there was a website, because I did, listen in to the conversations that were happening between the security officials and the audience. And the conversations were, there's a website, go to this website, and then you book. And so what that tended to create, it tended to create a backdoor situation. You see, not that the population tended to want to bribe the police officers or anything, but they had already been given an impossible challenge, which is in Kololo, look for an internet cafe. Or go through the hoops of data and all that. So I really saw at least more than half the population was challenged already by that barrier. So it's true what the reports coming out that while there's praise for the pandemic, waking up and creating convenient ways to access services, at the same time, there is a risk that many people could be left behind and the gap could be widened. So for all these digital solutions, I would like you to take interest, and usually the people who invite you for, like, for example, these stories or events happening, usually may not have it at the top of their agenda. But if you really want to capture the gist of the solution, it's always to ask to what end is this digital solution coming up? And I think that will challenge both the developers of these solutions to be able to refocus. It's not enough that it's an application on Apple Play Store or on Google, or it's not even an app. Maybe it's just something on the menus of USSD, what people call USSD, the stars of this world, star 15 or star 6. So really, for me, I always like to start with what is the contribution this solution has for it. And we know technology solutions are not cheap. So I think that's where would be good to start with. However, I think for this topic of vulnerable groups or groups at risk of being left behind, one of the often glossed over, forgotten aspects that are easy to miss is the root causes. So when you go and look at Uganda's statistics in terms of, say, literacy itself, so of course it will be easy to delve into the statistics because they tend to say 82% of Ugandans are literate. But then when you break it down gender-wise, you will find that there is a 10% gap between women and men. So you will find that you're more likely to be illiterate if you're a woman than you are male. However, if you break it down even further, you realize there's also a rural-urban gap. So Uganda Bureau of Statistics provides a map of Uganda and shades it with different colors and shows literacy levels. And to be honest, it's very easy to see the trajectory in terms of urban-rural. So I mention this because it's very important to get interest in the root causes of why certain aspects manifest. So recently, we did conduct a survey in West Nile, and one of the aspects of the survey was ownership of a mobile phone. And one of the things we did see was that you saw not only device mobile phone ownership being lower among women than men, but you also saw the same, comes to the same conclusion. You also saw that you are more likely not to own a phone if you are female than you are male. However, the challenge with these kind of conclusions is that the story, when such a story runs that fewer women have phones than men, the immediate interpretation the audience or those policymakers have is that then let's immediately start to see how to increase phone ownership among women. But usually, if the article has not delved deeper into what are the underlying contributing factors for such occurrences, you will find that the solution may not be tailored enough to actually cause that incremental value. So, for example, in this example of mobile phone ownership, when we delved deeper, most people would assume that the reason was affordability, that phones are expensive, right? But when we delved deeper, we found that that is one of many reasons. Other reasons include access to a point where to purchase the phone. So some of the women expressed that, I'm in this community, but after you interview me, do you mind walking around and showing me where in my community, where, you know? And so coupled with that, there is another nuance that is embedded in it, which is that not only access points are few, but also the time burden on women in terms of mobility to leave the home and go certain distances to purchase phones in rural areas may not be equal. So in terms of an 8-hour day, the women coupling the farming with the child care at home and then expecting that they will travel a certain distance to purchase the phone. So what appeared as a disproportionate ownership of phones underlies many factors, and some of them, as I've mentioned, is a point to purchase, and also, for example, mobility issues. So when you present an article with that root cause theme around it, it empowers action. It empowers people to design programs in such a way that they can have impact. So one of the responses, for example, that UNCDF did listening to this was come up with a digital community entrepreneur model where youth or adults within the community could become agents for such services to bring services closer to the community. But there is a host of other things like digital literacy, which we learned the hard way last pandemic, because what happened was when I think the pandemic broke out around March of last year, there was that famous photo of the market vendor who was sleeping on a mosquito net in the market. And that photo struck a chord with very many people. Like, there was a lot of systems broken for that to happen. And some of the systems broken was that you had customers who were struggling to access markets, but you also had market vendors who were struggling to find customers to serve them. And of course, in the midst of all that, there were all those lockdown restrictions, that transport and all that. So one of the things we thought about at UNCDF was, what if, being an urban area, what if there was a way someone could order foodstuffs from home, and there was a way in which the market vendors could be empowered to sell? So naturally, we partnered with Safe Border, and the reason for this was that the border riders were also affected because the border business, so we wanted to tick many boxes, right? So you have the border rider, you have the market vendor, you have the customer who has food needs at home. But one of the things that shocked us about this intervention was that we usually think of digital literacy as a rural-urban divide. But we did find that in even a place like Kampala, you needed to find an alternative which was not an app for people to order. Because while people might have devices, smartphones or future phones, the functionality needed for such an app to work were not required a certain skill level, and even in an urban area like this, that skill level was missing. And when the project started, I started imagining that we are going to be buying more smartphones for market vendors. What we did find, they had the smartphones, but what they needed was the literacy to actually take photos of their tomatoes, upload them on the app, and in the time frame of the lockdown, what ended up happening was Safe Border ended up taking more of those roles, taking the photos, uploading them so that someone could make the orders and all that. So I just bring that because often what I see as missing in, say, digital pieces is those root causes. Why things happen the way they are, I think usually is something that could empower communities. And of course, always, I think one thing I've taken away from Tabu's presentation today is finding an accountability partner. And I think the media could be an accountability partner for development actors by challenging the so what question. I think that one, usually they don't even want you to ask it. To what end? Usually it ends in happy everyone and a fantastic app is launched. But what value it adds is usually. Now, another piece which I also see could add value in this space is aligning parties. And this is very difficult to achieve in an article. Because usually, there is no network coverage in a certain place in Moyo. And usually, the burden of the article tends to fall on the telecom partner to provide why shouldn't there be network coverage? And I understand this context. A few years back when the South Sudan crisis broke, I was sent by Masiko to Yumbe to find out ways in which money could be transferred to refugees in Bidi. And of course, I reached there, network coverage was a challenge, and indeed I was asking MNOs, there is a business case here, because if there is network, you have some revenue share you make on the what? On the transfer. But what has changed between then and now is a realization that it's not enough that an NGO or government doing a SAGE program or different actors, it's not enough if only their end of the bargain is met, whereby they're able to fulfill their cash transfer program, right? It's also important that the private sector who are providing those services are able to break even. And indeed, one of the things that UNCDF did in those early days to incentivize investment in such places was a guarantee fund. That we guarantee that if you put a mast in a place X, that over a period of time, you'll be able to break even on your costs. And such type of conversation is balanced because we've seen projects, and I think we've seen projects whereby only one party is winning, and you find that it's not sustainable in the long term because when your project is done, the investment will walk away. Or the few people who made those difficult decisions in the private sector may be fired because they made an investment that was not informed by long-term sustainability. So this is the hardest thing to find anywhere in digital development. There is usually a skew to the vulnerable who are being served, but very little consideration is given to how it can be sustainable in such a way that all parties can be able to have a win-win situation. And I think in this one, this is something that we can, in future, delve deeper into some of the ways all parties can win. Now, the second last piece I would like to share is combining data sets. So when it comes to digital interventions, there are so many pieces, but there are some of those that are very key. And so it's always good to look at things from a holistic perspective. So for example, under the pillow, didn't find it and all that. So despite those benefits, it's very easy to conclude that, mobile money should be the way farmers are paid, right? For their own safety and all that. However, the reason I raised the point of looking at the whole mobile money environment is that you've probably, if you've not addressed the other, what some people call ecosystem enablers, you'll find that you've created more harm than good. Because one of the things that you realize is that, where will she cash out? How many agents in her community have the right liquidity to enable her convert this money that she received for her sunflower into the services she needs to purchase? Oftentimes, she's going to do a cash out, incur the withdrawal costs, plus the new mobile money charges, mobile money taxes of 0.5%. And so that value proposition you're presenting to the farmer should take into account these additional kind of constraints. And sometimes you may find the value may be watered down by a boda journey to go to the nearest, mobile money agent. And so another consideration to think about is that when you're developing that kind of piece or article, is that the solution you might be thinking of immediately is that, let's have a lot of mobile money with agents in the community. However, other options could be to just be abreast of the other developments in this sector. And for example, the same way you can pay for a car wash with merchant payments, perhaps that's a workaround for them. So one of the things I see that could be an additional value to reporting in this space is trying to ask more questions around the solutions being proposed, especially to do with I avoided the word ecosystem because it's very vague in some ways, but essentially those different nodes that we think, if they worked out, would be important. And then the last one, which I only jotted down this morning, is action. So a few weeks ago, I think if someone who works in Equity Bank did text me and say, hey, Ronald, I'm in Ramanja, which is in Kamwenge, and there's no network coverage here, and we are not able to serve refugees and Ugandans who would like to access our services. And it turned out to be simpler than I thought, because when he shared the coordinates of the location he was in, both MNOs, MTN and Airtel, were more than willing to go and assess the context there and boost coverage. So I think action is important because as I was listening to Tabu today, I was reminded of that famous picture of Vietnam. I think they call it the Panam photo, where in the war there was this famous Pulitzer-winning photo of a girl running with her siblings, and they were naked, they were burning. And one of the criticisms for the photographer was, why did you take the photo and not first take these children to first aid? And of course, we did learn later, indeed, that's what happened. That the girl survived because the cameraman raised an alarm to a point that he was able to access a vehicle to take the girls to access medical help. So it's not only, your intervention may not only stop at reporting a context, but having the network of different actors and saying there's this situation, who might help. And I think this sometimes can be helpful. Another case is that the famous photographer, I think it's called Kevin, in Sudan, who took that famous photo of the vulture and the girl. And it traumatized him and maybe could have contributed to his ultimate suicide. because the criticism he got is, why did you take the photo? Why didn't you take the girl, carry the girl and take her to the nearest food point? Because the way the world looked at it, there was a vulture and there was a dying girl and there was a cameraman. And so we know by now that that's what the cameraman did, that he made sure this girl was safe, yeah, up to the point she accessed what? Help. So similarly, when you find when you find anomalies in the community, and there are quite many, like network coverage, like exorbitant fees, or yesterday we published a report that I'll share the link, which is the impact of mobile money taxation in Uganda. And one of the things we did find out was the disproportionate impact in rural areas versus urban. Whereas in urban areas, most of us in this room switched to other forms of financial services, that alternative was not there for many in rural areas who were stuck with a financial service that was very costly. So cognizant of time, I would like to stop at that, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ronald. Thank you very, very much. Quite insightful, as we'll be using some of your knowledge as we go far, as we still expand on the same session that we are having, and that is about digital divide, increasing access, rural-urban women, and persons with disabilities. As I'm just about to welcome our panel for the session that we're just about to have. You reminded me when you talked about, I think, which area did you say you had gone to and they didn't have access to mobile internet? No, cell phones, Yumbe. And they don't have cell phones, they don't have network and the like. I think that happened at a point in some area I recall very well. As journalists, we do have a duty to bring not only to the service providers some of the alarming situations in areas like that. women that have phones would be uneven for reasons. A man will tell you, but why do you need a phone? So trying to bridge that, that particular divide, we will try to get to hear it from Simon first. Is there an issue that needs to be addressed, and how can it be addressed? The persons with disabilities or persons that have challenges when it comes to probably hearing or speaking, are they also in one way or the other considered digitally? Are they catered for? Are there challenges in that particular grouping? I don't want to put it in a grouping, but let's accept the fact that probably there's a different way that certain people come to look at them. So I don't know what his reaction would be in the first place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, MC. And I'm very happy to be here for being given this opportunity. My name I've been introduced. My name is Simon Eroku. I work with Open Science Media, and our focus mainly is on issues to do with making communication and accessible information for people with disabilities. And our more focus is with people with hearing impairment in areas of health, education, and different areas of all spheres of our lives. So when we are talking about the issues and challenges, my main focus is accessibility. First, before I think of the accessibility, how to access the media, you must know that there's already challenges out there that people with disabilities are facing. And we with people with disabilities, there are so many barriers that we are experiencing, and there are so many people with disabilities out there. One of each Ugandan here is a person with disability. If you had the statistics right, you would know that we are many out there, but most of the time we are not put into consideration. The coverage is very low. The information that is put out there is not accessible enough. So how can we understand disability? How can people, how can journalism or journalists understand people with disabilities? When you're reporting, how can you put issues dealing with people with disabilities be put to specifically dealing with people with disabilities? Because before we saw, when you're talking about health, people how to access health out there, we forget about people with disabilities and their social barriers. For example, if I have a barrier as a person with hearing impairment, my barrier is what? Communication. If I'm going to the hospital, will I be able to talk to the nurse or to the doctor in a private way without an interpreter in there? So there are so many situations or spheres of life that we lose out of people with disabilities. So we see the media covering stories and having all these, good stories out there, but in the way they are perceived, it's perceived wrongly. For example, the words, the terms that are used when you're reporting, sometimes they are not disability sensitive. That brings to people feel like, okay, people with disabilities, they sort of like report when they are giving them sympathy, which is in a wrong way. It's not sympathy that we need. All we need is to change the way people perceive us and feel and make us feel like we can also do what people do. So sometimes it's not, for example, a person who is deaf, you cannot really know me when I'm walking around unless I tell you that I'm a deaf person. So if you're covering such stories, where is a person with disability included in all the stories that we cover as journalists? So for us, as people with disabilities, we want to try and bring all these issues to surface and to have accessible journalism, where people can easily access information in an accessible format. What I see is media right now, the coverage is big and it's really very good, but the challenge is the question is how can we include, how can we make this digitalization be inclusive enough for people with disabilities to also be to feel they are also important. So our focus is many times people, when they are reporting these stories, they focus more of the sympathy side. For example, if a story has a person with disabilities, with a disability, more of the focus will be on, oh dear, or he needs help, or they feel that sort of sympathy for that person instead of focusing on the real issue of the issue, the exact issue that is affecting that person with disability. So they made, we as journalists, we have to change the way how we report our stories. When I'm giving a story for a person with disabilities that is inclusive, how do you relay your information? Is it in a positive way? Are you giving out this information to people to feel sympathy for the person in the story, or you're giving out that information for a change of that person's life? Yes, those are some of the challenges that are. Then the other thing is the area for policy and guidelines, the guidelines and the policies under the accessible information. For example, we as the journalists, many times we know that we have sort of the policy that we have to follow. We have to follow. For example, if we for example, if you have a website and you want to give in information, to put information on your website, you know very well that when I'm putting this information on my website, I have to put that information in an accessible way. If I'm a person with a visual impairment, I cannot read very well. Can I read information that is on your website? Is it accessible enough? When I'm reading this information on your website, can it be accessible enough for me to understand what is on your website? Secondly, when I'm a person with hearing impairment, can you make your information, the information on your website, be accessible enough for all the people that are accessing your website to understand what is on your website? So you have to make sure that whatever information that you're giving on your website is accessible enough. For example, if you're putting a video, does it have subtitles? Can a person with hearing impairment really understand what is on your website? Can it be accessible enough for me to understand as a person with hearing impairment? So those are some of the issues that we're supposed to be solving. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Simon. I think this is well put, clearly put. Save your questions for a short while. We'll be getting back to that. We'll be opening the session immediately. Mr. Omuya, thank you very much for joining us. Please tell us about ICA and briefly your contribution to of course, the subject that we have at hand. Our challenge is making sure that we are closing the digital divide, also increase access to rural, urban women and persons with disabilities.
Thank you, Sean. I don't know if you can hear me on my mask.
Yes, I can hear you, but if you're uncomfortable, I can be able to provide sanitizer for you. If you're free to do that, if you're also vaccinated, you can just remove it. It's okay.
It's all right. My name is Noah Omuya. I have an online media platform that I call iChair Media. iChair works with a team of young people, young journalists from Teso and Karamoja. And what we basically do is sustainable development communication. I remember yesterday in one of our panel discussion here, something was mentioned about sustainable development communication. You know, our journalism has to move away from just doing hard stories to impactful stories of impact. You know, and when we talk about the kind of reporting we do, number one. First, the people we work with, they are people who are fresh from campus, or they are those who are still at campus but still have passion in journalism. So we basically give skills to our team, mentorship to our team, and build passion, you know, in writing, and then those who do digital journalism, multimedia storytelling. And for now, the focus is on climate change stories, you know. When you talk about climate change, it affects almost everything, you know, in the line of SDGs, from no poverty to zero hunger to everything, it affects it all. So that's basically about HR. And
Please go on.
yeah, and for our discussion here, number one, before I forget, I have learned something from my brother here, Eroku, on the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the kinds of stories we tell. Usually, I used to know that subtitles are for maybe translating the language. If someone is speaking in Karamojong and you want someone who doesn't understand Karamojong to know what he's talking about, you put subtitles. But now I realize it's necessary. It's necessary to have every kind of video that we publish to have it subtitled so that we can include people with hearing impairments and stuff like that. Now, and on the topic today, or what we're discussing here today, I wanted to say that I think we're talking about people, they haves and they have nots. You know, the digital divide is so clear here in Uganda. It is like a new way of saying people who live in the urban setting and the rural setting. You know, there were always those challenges. You know, even if you come to the village, they even call you a villager. You go to town, you know, stuff like that. So now this is the issue at hand. We are in the new generation that is full of technology. And we are living among people, the media platforms that we have now are so much digitalized. But now, the access to this information, how uniform is it? We talk about, like, personally, where my target is. It is in the rural setting, Teso, Karamoja. I have a conviction in me, and it's like a debt that I have to pay. Whatever stories we write, the stories that I write, the ones that I publish, do they really reach the target audience? Because I publish on a website, and then the people I'm talking about, the people in the face of the story, do not really benefit from these stories. So who does? I mean, who should I favor? It doesn't favor the real person that I want. Because these are the areas you go, and even if you jump on an anthill, you can't even make a call. What about now reading a story, a full report on a website? You know, there was a time I was in Kotido, you know, that ongoing silent war between the army and the warriors and the cattle rustlers and all that. So there was this time when there was a gunfire exchange between the soldiers and the warriors in Kotido, between Kotido and Napak districts. So when I reached the scene, I found soldiers hanging cut, you know, these Renzori bottles. They drink water and then they cut and hang on a tree. And then when I asked, why are there so many hanging on the tree? And then they tell me, this is how we look for network, to make just a phone call, you know? And then they told me, you know, the attack that happened here, so many people, lives were lost. And then they couldn't call for backup immediately because there was no network. I said, okay. So this is what we're talking about here. Now, what are the challenges at hand? They're all visible. What do I recommend? Because I'm sure that we might not have much time. Some of the recommendations I have is there's need to revisit some of the government policies, you know, and they should encourage competition in domestic telecom markets. You know, there's this idea of having 4G this side, then this side is only 3G, and then when you want to afford this side, the internet, we're talking about people who cannot afford $1 per day, who are living below, you know, poverty line. How can someone stay in Kabong? How can someone spend 5,000 shillings a day for just internet? And yet, that 5,000, they buy a half a kilo that they use for a day or even 2. So there's need to revisit that. And then I think there should also be, you know, removal of some taxes. Each time we're having more taxes on internet, more taxes on what, you know, some of these taxes should be removed, and then maybe, you know, look for ways, a means of getting money from. Someone told me, you should buy an AfriCell line. I said, why? If you have AfriCell, we can talk like free of charge. I said, how? you know. So one time I tried and it worked. Something like that can be done, you know. Maybe also, for now, I think I can share that with you. Thank you. There's another question.
I'll just ask you something briefly. You talked about, you give an example of how network can be accessed in a particular area. As far as I understand, you do some work in the Karamoja area, right? How have you helped those people to, get into, to bridge that particular gap where everything is almost running digital and the like?
Yeah, sure.
Briefly, if you can be able to comment about that.
You know, what happens now is we thought of another mode of partnership, you know, bridging the gap in this way. We do digital, we are online, and then most of the people are so traditional. So we go to a radio station and say, we are doing this and this. And then it is purely understandable that the people we want to reach to do not have access to a smartphone, do not have access to a computer, but they have a radio set in the house. So if we publish a story now, and then is it possible for you also to rerun on radio? And that's what's happening. That's how we have tried to bridge the gap. So we have had partnerships with radio. In Karamoja, there's one radio called Akicha. In Teso, there is a radio called Joshua FM. And then yesterday I was here with the manager for Etop Radio, the Vision Group Radio, Mr. Kiso Joseph. He shocked me by giving me a platform. He says every Sunday I should go to radio. I mean, he's giving me to be a permanent panelist in a radio show and also share what I do, you know? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. As we move on to Mr. Clinton, Vijana, right? Cobb. You do a lot of work with young people, clearly, at least I know. And I do believe there's a contribution you're making through there. Probably starting with that topic, just go about briefly what you're doing and how we can be able to bridge and close this particular gap in the area that you're concentrating.
Thank you so much. Greetings to everyone. Thank you once again for joining us today for this amazing conversation. I'm already inspired by the fact that when we are meeting in this space, people are getting to interact and get to do work outside of this space. So thank you, Media Focus, for putting together this platform to enable people. I think we can clap for that, really. So my name is Clinton Twena Tumanye. I work as a communications officer for Vijana Core. My interest and focus is really on communications for social development. I've worked in other spaces that really empower young people. And specifically at Vijana Core, what we do is we make sure that young people in all spaces, especially the last mile youth, we enable them, we empower them to be seen and be heard. I'm intrigued by the topic today here about inclusion because I'm currently doing my master's in digital journalism and communications at Aga Khan University. And my master's thesis is on what the media has done to contribute to the SDGs. So in areas of including young people, making sure that we write about the SDGs, that's really my area of focus. About our conversation today in why is it important for us to include young people in the conversations that we have here. It's not a secret that we know that there are so many young people in this country. We have about 77% of Uganda's population being young people under the ages between the ages of 15 and 25. So that means that when we are talking about development and matters that impact society, we cannot exclude young people. It's needless to say that we don't have so many people who have access to the internet. But also, while we are speaking of young people, it's important to note that all young people are included. We are talking about young people in rural communities, young people in urban communities, but also young persons living with disabilities, young persons living with HIV. So while we are having these kinds of conversations, I want us to note that all the young people in all their different capacities are included in these kind of conversations that we are having. So why is it important for us to have young people's issues being tabled in matters affecting our country? There's this common misconception that that young people like fun things, young people like music, young people like entertainment, young people are not interested in politics, all those complicated things. But that's a misconception, because in the debates we get to see in this country, you see that more and more young people are getting to come up in initiatives, in platforms to speak about issues that affect them. So it's important that we include them regardless of these other misconceptions that young people are not interested, that young people like music and all of those kinds of things. I would like to think that that's not true. And we risk media social exclusion if we don't include young people in these kinds of conversations. So if we are talking about policies that are progressive, why would we then exclude young people for being part of discussions in parliament, discussing these issues that affect them, because they matter to them. They are the largest population in this country. So I think it's important to include young people because they are part of the discussion. And for us to move forward, for us to plan and think of Vision 2040, Vision 20-something, young people need to be part of the conversations, whether it is infrastructure, education, or any other sector in this country. Young people need to be part of those conversations. But also, when you have an informed citizenry, there's so much that you can do as a nation. There's so much you can address. I mean, when we, as journalists, I'm also a trained journalist. I had an opportunity to practice for a while.
That's a good thing. It's the best job in the world.
Yes, it's a good job, but we need to pay our journalists. We need to incentivize them a bit more.
That is a very big, important thing to talk about.
Thank you very much. So we need to have an informed citizenry. And like I said, while we have these so many young people, we should inspire them to be informed, to be part of the debates, be part of the conversations, because when we're growing up, they used to tell us that you are the leaders of tomorrow. Tomorrow is now. Tomorrow is now. So where are these young people?
Trust me, they told us the same thing when we were young. And you're just very, very young. Us, we were very young like this.
Yeah, so we need, the chain needs to stop. We can't keep telling our children that they're the leaders of tomorrow, yet the leaders of yesterday are still in power. Let's empower young people and let them take up these spaces. You can clap to that. Thank you.
I won't be with you when the drone passes by. Okay, please proceed.
And as I conclude, I wanted to keep my discussion a bit short to entertain any other questions and interactions. We are seeing more and more young people taking part in international activism. There's a young female Ugandan activist who of course there's an agenda behind some of these activists, and that's a discussion for another day. But seeing young people taking part in conversations of climate change, democracy and policy integration, it's something that is inspiring. So let's inspire more young people to be part of these conversations. Let us give them the platforms. Let us be more inclusive in when we are having fora like these ones. Let's invite young people. Let's get to hear their opinions. And together we can have a progressive citizenry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Time is not that much on our side. I'll take one or two questions as I try to wrap this particular session on a brief one.
Okay, thank you so much. Mine is not a question, but what we are going through today was alluded to some centuries ago by one of the communication scholars known as Michael Lohan. Michael Lohan brought up a theory on technological advancement, and somehow he said that at a time point, at a time X, technological advancement will overrun mankind. And this is what we are experiencing today. So the only solution, I think, is that it should be a deliberate move within all the spaces we have, that you take an initiative to begin adopting to the new technologies if you are going to survive. And if you are not going to adopt to the new technologies, then you will not survive in the current situation. So it is already with us, and someone talked about it some years ago, and then it's time for us now to get into that direction. The other area is on the areas of disabilities. I think as we advocate for media to play its role in supporting people with disabilities, I think the people with disabilities also should only play their part by proving that if they are accorded this space, they can use it very well. For example, TVs have given space, but you look at it, it's very small. Or whatever sign language is something small aside. But somehow too small. But if media can come up and give a full program for a person with a disability to come on air and then explain something that maybe someone with his naked eyes can't explain. Maybe he's a blind person and he's talking about, you know, an election where people are bribing and doing all this, and, you know, he's bringing up real issues that we people who are visually okay can't see, but these guys are in position to see it. I think this will be the starting point. And from what they are doing, producing sign content and you leave it at your production center does not really help. Try to look for a way of channeling these sign materials you have produced to different media houses such that you begin fighting for this space and it should be given to you.
Thank you very much. I thought you wanted us to, you know, start advocating that instead of making the sign language in a small box, we should put these big news anchors in the small box, and then we put the sign language in the big one. That's the right thing for you. That's what you should have said.
Thank you very much. Still, my name is Esther, and I would want to say that I've been privileged to actually read a few things. And the UN has recognized the internet as an enabler for fundamental rights. And then my question comes to how are we ensuring, you know, how can we then use smart policies to reduce this digital divide?
And this is addressed to Clinton. Briefly, yeah?
Thank you very much. The first point that I would like to put out is, it's like two. I would like to answer on the side of the sign language interpreters and the TV shows, most probably the news broadcasts. I happen to host, and it is on record, that it is the first radio and TV broadcasts that I hosted the Sign Language Interpreters Association on Radio Mama FM to speak about the issues of people with hearing impairment and the sign language interpreters. And the first question I asked these people was the same concern. Why is it that in the news broadcast, the sign interpreters are just given that small box? Then the answer they told me, they say that it is just a starting point, because even having them on TV to interpret for their audience wasn't an easy thing. So they are saying they are trying to copy it from other international media houses, like even if you see it on CNN, BBC, you see them on that small box. To me, I was concerned because some of the time you may not even understand the language that they are using. And another thing goes to Simon. Simon, what have you done to collaborate with other types of disabilities? Because on your submission, I didn't hear about it. And maybe when you have that collection, that collaborative work, I think you can push on some of the issues together and they can be heard. Thank you very much.
I mentioned earlier that I don't have much time for the particular session, and I've cut out so many other people that had requested to pose their questions. Clinton, your reaction as we go eventually to Simon.
Thank you so much. My question is from Esther. Thank you, Esther, for your question. And she asks, how can we adopt smart policies to address the digital divide? When television came so many years ago, there was a theory by, I think, the cultivation theory by George Kepler. And the theory basically said that more and more television was going to cultivate a certain mindset around the people, whereby when children watch cartoons, they are going to start acting like cartoons. Or when people binge a lot of television, there's going to be less work and a lot of television, and there's not going to be any work done. Which is not true. I mean, we've had television for so many years, and people are still progressive and still able to do their work with whatever they watch. With even new television and streaming platforms like Netflix, people are still able to watch television and still be able to go on about with their businesses. And the same kind of mindset came around the early 2000s when the internet was a world boom in the whole world. And people thought that, first of all, the internet was going to shut down all the businesses and there's not going to be work for anyone, which is not true. People thought that the internet or social media was going to make people lazy, and which is still not true. Yeah, the internet has had its downs, but all the different misconceptions about the internet are not true. The point I'm trying to make is that these new technologies, whether it was radio, television, or now social media and the new media, they come with the upsides. So, and what happens is, because now technology is faster than when we migrated from radio and all these other different technologies that we've had over the years, technology is a bit faster than all the rest. And the issue that raises is that you find that technology is evolving faster than the policymakers can be able to cope up with. And you find that when UCC or other legislative agencies in the different countries, they try to come up with legislation, the coping is less in line with how fast the technology is. So that is something that we're trying to grapple with, making sure that we have legislation that matches our technologies. But also, what happens in most of African countries is that most of our legislations were in 1995 or when we got our independence. And you find that the issues that were addressed then, or the kind of policies that were in our constitutions at the time, which we still have at the moment, were stated because colonial powers wanted a certain power over the ruled. And those are the kind of legislations that we are still operating with. So how can we make sure that we amend some of those legislations? How can we have progressive legislations that are in line with the kind of technologies and the kind of media we have today? So I think that is an issue of progressive legislation, which I can't say that it's something that can be done overnight, but we need to engage all these legislative bodies to make sure that we have progressive legislation. Yeah.
Thank you very much. As we pass on the microphone to Simon, as we do a wrap-up, I think the question is still, you can still interpret the question for him.
Thank you so much for those questions. I'm very, very happy that you have given me all those questions, and yeah, it shows me that you're interested in the area that I am working on. So for the issue of the sign language interpretations on the television, I understand that the policies that we have right now and the laws that have been put there out there in the Constitution, it says we must have sign language interpretation. Yes, during the news, we must have sign language interpretation at least once in your main broadcast. And that was the UCC orders. But then the issue goes on the policies that we have right now and the guidelines that we have. We must have standards. That is what UCC says. But then when you go to the policies that are supposed to be implemented, and when you go to the Communication Acts that we have right now, the time that when they are implementing all these, the UCC has not provided the clear guidelines. Yes, it says we must have an insent for a sign language interpreter, but how big is this insent? They did not provide such details so that when someone is providing all these services, they can follow and be able to give the services in a clear way. So yes, these policies are there, these communication acts are there, but then the way they are brought out, they are not so clear. The guidelines are not so clear to guide the people who are providing us the services, which is really hard for them to understand because it's a new area that some of those people are trying to adopt to. So we as the people, we've been advocating for this because clearly enough, we don't understand. Yes, the sign language interpreters are there that sometimes we do not get what they are signing because of the small instant. But then even if you go to UCC and you try and complain and you tell them and you try and explain what exactly is happening, they will say we'll follow up, and then afterwards, what happens? Nothing. So we've been here and waiting for a long time for some of the issues to be resolved. So right now, we as Open Science Media, we want to come up with a TV, sort of like a media TV. That I'm happy we got a grant from Aga Khan University, where we want to come up with a hub where we can have almost half of the screen having a sign language interpreter, where we can have the sign language interpretation fully accessed by people with hearing impairment. And we hope with time, as years go by, we'll be able to have a real TV broadcast out there that can be accessed by people with hearing impairment.
A round of applause for our entire panel.
And then the other issue, sorry?
Proceed.
Oh, okay. And then the other issue is, I want to say thank you for the feedback, that the recommendations that you're giving us. It's very important. And this is how, you talked about collaboration, how we can collaborate with people with disabilities, other people with disabilities. That is very key because we cannot work alone. We cannot work alone, and we try to bring all those people with disabilities on board, try to make sure that we develop and build this movement together, because I think we cannot work in alone as deaf people. We need people with, youth who are blind, those who cannot see, who are having visual problems, and all those people with disabilities who can be included in our programs. We cannot work alone, and that is one of our way forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And just for information, my name is Susan Mujawa, the one who is always in the small instant you're talking about on NTV and Spark TV.
You will get out of that small thing, and we will go there. Susan, thank you very much for, what is he saying?
Yeah, and he's saying that when you're clapping for me, I would request you do this, because he can't hear this clapping, but he can see and hear. Thank you so much.
And smell. Some of you just do like... But to our entire panel, we can't go past this as we try to salvage time. To Clinton, thank you very much. Send back our greetings to Vijana, and as well, thank you very much, Mr. I beg your pardon, Noah Omuya, that's the CEO of AICA. I hope I still pronounce it right. And Simon Eruku, thanks for coming through. As, of course, Mr. Ronald Rachgumba, who started this particular session. Unfortunately, we didn't have much more time to have that interaction, but at least you made a very good preamble for us. Thanks to the entire panel. Let's put our hands together for them. Kindly take your seats. Thank you. To our friends who are watching online, we haven't forgotten about you. They're on Zoom as well. We love you dearly. Thank you. If you are active online, please go ahead and look out for our handle, Uganda Media Week 21, hashtag Media Week 21, and as well Media Matters Uganda. Look out for that. Our YouTube is active and streaming live. Please look out for Media Focus on Africa, and Facebook Media Focus on Africa as well. Twitter, at MFA Uganda. We'll be grateful hearing from you. There are some comments that I'll be taking some time to read at a later stage. But without wasting any time, I would like us to go into a subject that is very, very, very important. Yesterday, when we interacted, I think when we made our introductions, I do believe it was on average 60% of the members who are seated here. Most of you have an online outlet. Am I wrong if you were here yesterday? Like at least everyone has got that media outlet where they are putting out information, they're reaching out to people, they're the first to post. Some of this information, we are depending on it, like dearly. It is very good information. But then, of course, we do have some giants in the market who are out there who are making it much more better when it comes to online dissemination. But it doesn't matter that this is going to stop at that. I do believe this is a direction that we have to take, whether they like it or not. But when Dr. Emily was talking in the morning, remember she, in one way or the other, mentioned that to the diggers, they that don't have internet, they that have no access to cell phones, what do they do in that regard? That is going to be our particular session as we're just about to go to the next level. Please take a glass of water as I prepare my guests. Thank you very much. All right, I hope you enjoyed the water. And let's go for that particular session. There are some individuals that can speak, without missing words, but can speak with authority when it comes to online, digital, and the like, online publications, if I may use that particular word. As remember, our theme remains navigating obstacles in Uganda's journalism. So, online publication in pursuit of quality journalism is a very strong subject that we'll give time for. And we will as well take some time for a question and answer session before we go for our lunch. Our friends online, this is very important for you, so stay put and let's wait for that to happen. As we put our hands together, let's welcome one by one Alex Ataire. Alex Ataire comes from PML, for those of you that have been following online publications, and I happens to be the PML Daily Director. I think you did not clap very well. And me, I don't like that. In that regard, I actually thought, Susan, you were going to be gesturing a different way, but I also saw you were clapping. But it's okay. And also to do welcome the editor of the Now Post. Please put your hands together for Idris Chigundu. And now I'll go to the ladies, and I'll start with Carol Bayanga. She's the head of mentorship and partnership at the Daily Monitor. Please put your hands together. Nayo olulalonda bulangako. I am the one next to the speaker here. And my dance camp, please just put our hands together as we welcome Carol Bayanga. What you don't understand, when music plays, my body just moves, just like that, without control. And also a freelance journalist. This is a very interesting facet that I would like to hear from, being a freelance journalist, but online, how that works. Please do welcome Sarah Biriomumisho. She hasn't reached, but you stopped clapping. The good thing, me, I'm not the one clapping because I have a microphone. I can't clap, but here we are. And this subject is quite vast and very, very, very wide. I pray that we can be able to have enough time for it. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We will be sharing that microphone in one way or the other if you feel like you're uncomfortable. Some of us are vaccinated. It's a good thing to be vaccinated. Very, very good thing. But I also think, as many people are worried about vaccination, they should like try it on politicians in the first place. If I told the vaccination is safe, well and good, but if the vaccination is not safe, then the nation, the country will become safe. Those politicians will be, one way or the other, suffering. But I would like to welcome you once again. I will not actually delay on this particular subject. I will start with you, Carol, because I think the microphone is just close to you. When we talk about online publications in pursuit of quality journalism, is this happening in this day and age?
Thank you, Sean. That's a loaded question. I believe it is. I believe it's happening, but I believe that there are challenges and many constraints towards that. I believe that there's a reason that there are many online publications today. There's a reason that online journalism is very popular today. But I believe that there are many challenges and constraints that come up and that, affect the way we do our journalism. So do we have a quality journalism? Yes, we do. There are many publications that show that they are working towards that. We have many stories that are broken, that are done well. We have many multimedia stories that go up on our websites and different platforms that look good and that, bring us information in a way that is different, that we would not have felt or understood if it was on a traditional platform. So there are many good things happening and quality journalism happening. But there are, like I said, there are challenges. There are challenges of fake news, the challenges of, having the enough, data for the journalists to bring the stories. So there's also the challenge of the viability, the money that comes with trying to put up an online publication. That sort of hampers the quality journalism. So I would say it's happening, but there are constraints and challenges for sure.
Well, I'll move on to Sarah, as I'll clearly just go direct with a question that you'll be surprised with. Online publications and all this much that we have, is it something that people train? Do they go to a school to train with? Did you train with this, or you just found yourself doing this?
Thank you. No, I did not specifically go to train for online. I started doing online around 2014 with a local media house while I worked on radio. So this is something that I was doing on the side. But the training that you get is the usual. There are so many trainings that happen. Like we are here, there is a lot that we are learning, but also there are online trainings that are done by media companies that will come up and teach how to use the digital tools, how to start up your own websites, how to run it, the ethics, how to do the videos, how to put audio, how to do all these things. There may not be a school that is specifically teaching you how to do journalism online, but there are media companies that are doing this. And yes, more people are learning. So you can't wake up one morning and say, I'm opening up a website, I'm starting to write stories, I'll put a video, I'll put a photograph, and you don't know what you're doing. So definitely, there is some training that may not have come from an online media training school. Yes.
Alex, it's good to see you, and at you, I'll directly just go to a very simple question.
Thank you.
Traditional, publication. We're talking about the papers that we've been buying on a daily.
Adaptation with audiences moving to the digital spaces, it is not fair to say that the online is the one that is killing the digital or the traditional or the legacy media.
It's natural disease.
As we say it, but it was always
going to be natural that those then managing the legacy or traditional media products had to follow the consumers where they are. Because what is happening is that the consumers have moved or are rapidly moving online, and then the guys who are on the other space have to adapt. Having said that, this was not my question. It was for Sarah, but I thought I can supplement. I am aware that then with that shift of the media having to move to follow and the media should have been ahead of this. The media should have been moving ahead of the users or the readers or the audiences. I am aware that most schools, most training schools, journalism training schools, they have adapted their training to heavily also teach digital journalism. It is happening in Makere. I think I employ journalists now. So some of the guys who come to me, who come to my platforms for employment, I know that they have been taught, they have done course units to deal with digital journalism. It's happening in Mukono. I'm currently doing a course with the Aga Khan University School of Media and Communication Studies, and I know that they are also doing that digital training at even postgraduate level. I think one of the previous speakers here is a student of their digital journalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Idris, as we move on, I do believe that you mentioned actually when we were starting this particular session that almost half of the individuals in this room, at least each one of them owns an outlet. Is there going to be need for regulation, and is that even possible?
Thanks, Sean, for the question, and I would like to thank Media Focus for organizing this wonderful event. My sense is that I think online media is not so much different from traditional media in terms of what they seek, objectives, what they seek to achieve, their underlying goals. The underlying goal of an online media organization should more or less be to hold those in power accountable, to inform the public, or to inform and to entertain. So in that respect, I'm of the view that the same, I've always been in support of self-regulation or media houses, similar to what I think exists in Uganda. I know we have the Media Council, but I believe even when it comes to online, I think as either proprietors or owners or editors, we should have the ability to regulate ourselves. I mean, to draw the line on what should be published and what shouldn't, and generally to look out for ourselves. I don't so much believe in state regulation. I'm not a believer in state regulation. When it comes to the media, I believe as the media we have the personnel, we have the experienced people, whether online or mainstream, to regulate ourselves, to check ourselves. That's what I believe.
Well, thank you very much. But now, in that regard, we are going to have individuals trying to regulate themselves. And sometimes I don't believe everyone has that discipline. But you will bounce back to the same. Differently, I'm going to be carrying out this session, and it's going to be the audience's session, not particularly mine to ask most of the questions. But I'll do one more round, and I'll start with you, Idris, once again. What's your comment about fake news when it comes to online publication?
Certainly, I mean, fake news is a big dent to journalism in general, not only online, but journalism in general. I think one of the reasons why there's a lot of fake news online is this so-called competition among some online media organizations, I think, to be the first to break news. Now, what that means is that many of them don't do enough verification before they publish some of this news. People will go to Twitter platforms, will go to social media accounts of organizations of people without verifying the authenticity of those platforms, and then publish something. Because at the end of the day, I think some of the online publications are looking, at the end of the day, they are looking for numbers. They are looking for numbers, and in that way, they think that's also one of the ways you can sway advertisers. So for me, but also the other thing, one of the things that has led is that online publications have not yet been built up in terms of structure like traditional media. I think many online publications are 2 people, 3 people, or organizations. So they don't have those layers of sub-editors, of editors, to sometimes verify this information before it goes up. They don't have enough checks and balances, similar to traditional media organizations, where you find that at least they have quite a number of layers where news is first filtered before it's published. So in me, it's partly a question of, one, wanting to get numbers. As the number of clicks and whatever we call it in online, you want to have so many people read something, and you can use those numbers to make a case before advertisers that my website is listed. But also, most importantly, is also the fact that many online publications lack the structure. They're one-people companies. They lack the structure to verify some of this news before it's published.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to go back to Carol once again. And in this regard, still, I want you to expound more, especially with a particular presentation that you had about online publication in pursuit of quality journalism. I think your presentation is ready.
Oh, okay, thank you. So it was just supposed to be really an opener to what we are discussing already. Things we already know, really, so I'll quickly go through it. Like we've been talking about, just for us to have an idea of what online journalism is and why the excitement around it currently. So we just go to the next slide. So basically, we all know online journalism is content that's produced and distributed by digital platforms like websites and blogs. And in Uganda, the platforms are numerous. They've been growing. There's been a sprout of them. Traditional houses like, say, NBS, NMG, New Vision have their online publications, but also individuals are setting up their own publications because they're realizing, the crowds are shifting there, and some even traditional houses are going completely digital. So it just shows us how big this is and how it's growing very fast. But like all my panelists have said, it is still journalism. It's not just breaking the news, hearing something and saying, this has been said, let's break it. It is still journalism. And the tenets of journalism are that content must be well-sourced, it must be verified, it must be fair, it must be objective. So even if the platforms are different, even if the way we view them are different, it remains the same journalism. It's not just getting something we think is news and putting it there. And so we go to why we think it's, why is it appealing? Because next slide. It's appealing because it's accessible. All of us here have gadgets. We have phones, we have tablets, we have laptops. Many people have this, and so it's easier for them. It's more accessible for me to find out what the news is on my phone than, sort of going to pick a paper or, trying to find a place if I don't have a TV to find a TV. It's fast. When the bombs went off in the city, people knew within minutes what had happened, and they were updated constantly. This is what's happening. This is who has been. This is what's happening at the hospitals. So it's fast, and that's why people are excited about it. And it's engaging because now the audiences find that they can be part of the news, or they can be part of providing the news because they're there. We're asking them, what are you seeing? Let us know what you're seeing. Share your pictures, share your videos, and we're asking them questions. So they feel excited because now they are part of it. It's not just something you go and you see it and watch and you're like, oh, wow, you can now actually be part of it. And it keeps records. It's easy. Where I work at NMG, at Daily Monitor, people really want to find out records. They keep asking, I'd like to know this story, that ran last month, last year, 3 years ago. And with online, it's easy. You just go online, search, and you'll find the story. So that's why it's becoming appealing to audiences right now. And there was a research that UCC did, which just shows that the numbers are really growing. This was the Q3 report, 2020, And it shows that the numbers right now, okay, by March 2020, 18.8 million people were able to subscribe to the internet, which means that about 45% of Ugandans are now on the internet or can access it. And the growth is, it just keeps growing, it just keeps growing. And the smartphone users are also growing. It grew from 6.8 million in January of 2020 to 7 million. So that's about 1 point something. So the growth it's quite fast. It's quite fast, and which shows that, which is why now the media houses know, and they are thinking, these guys are online. We need to find them. We need to talk to them. We need to talk to them in the space that they want to be talked to, and listen to them in the space that they want to be listened to. If you go to the next slide. And so how is that affecting media houses? Because it's appealing to many audiences, media houses are now trying to make sure that they have this content online. And many people out there are creating their own websites. Some of them are doing news. Some of them are going into niche like only sports or business. But that's happening. And also many media houses are trying to improve what they're offering. They're trying to provide apps for people to find them on, to provide a better experience for the users, to change their look, to change their format so that the audiences can enjoy and can sort of stick with them, because the media is looking for those numbers. What that means, like what we have been discussing, is that it's a slippery slope, because now there is a fight to get audiences, there's a fight to get traffic. So there's that hurry to put up content, there's that hurry to be the first, because that's where online journalism sort of, it's in two ways. You either get the crowd because you're fast enough and you get the news quickly, or you provide really unique content. But like I think it was Idris who was saying, the online platforms, even in traditional houses, you find that the online platforms are not given as much resourcing, as much human resource money to do those unique topics. So you'll find that in the paper or the news or on the TV, traditional media, they'll go and do a story. They'll take 3 months to do a really good special report. That resource is not given many times to online, whether it's just within the online house itself or to the, it's not given to them. So it's hard for them to get unique content to be able to give you, and you say, I can only find this on Daily Monitor, or I can only find this on, on PML. It is difficult because of that resourcing. So what the online houses now know is that I need to be the first. I need to be the first to be able to put that up. But then, like we've seen in so many places, it becomes a problem if they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing well. And so at the end of the day, we must remember that online journalism is still journalism, and journalism is the production and distribution of reports on current events. I picked this, it's a quote from somewhere, based on facts and supported with proof or evidence. It doesn't matter if it's online, if it's traditional, it has to be supported and with evidence and based on facts. So that as we continue the discussion, let us just remember that the appeal of this is so wide, which is why we are all trying to get the audiences. But there are things that we need to look at to enable us to provide quality journalism. Thank you.
A round of applause for Kara. Thank you very much. Quite a brilliant one. If you have a question for her, please save it. We're just about to get into that particular session. If I may go back to Alex, I wanted to ask you something that I would, just in one way or the other, believe comes through with what Kara has presented when it comes back to the ethics of, when it comes to news. How do you get the news? Are you ethical? Are you balanced? Are you fair? The word unprofessionalism still comes through when it comes to what we get as content online. Especially now, I'm referring to maybe they that have not entirely been able to pull it off. But we need to see all that Kara has presented come through online. But people don't trust it as much. Like I would say, that is there, and professionalism is there. And is this something that we can check in the future, whereby I am myself editor, I am myself a scout, I'm the one who is going to get the news, I'm the one who is going to control and paste the news myself. How can we be able to take that particular regulation?
Thank you, Sean. It is a key issue. How then you enforce standards to ensure that good journalism is everywhere, both on the traditional and then moving on. The online platforms, the advantage of the traditional platforms is that the setup has been very deliberate to deal with all those issues of gatekeeping, to deal with issues of ethical standards. That's why, you know, most of the well set up traditional media houses have, first of all, editorial codes, what they call editorial policies. But when you look at the people who have come into the space, into the ecosystem of the online news space, and you ask, I think we have 100 plus online platforms in Uganda. If you were to ask some of them whether they actually follow any internal editorial policy, I don't think you would get even 20% of those ones who have set up and they have the structures, they have appointed an editor.
So doesn't that punch holes in what Carol just presented that should be observed? Like everything has to be observed, including policies.
Absolutely, I was coming to that because I came from the background of legacy media. I'm now only 100% focusing on online. I take note of what happens in the legacy media in terms of content generation and storytelling formats and what we can learn from there. But in terms of business model, I am focusing on how we can deal with the digital spaces. Now, one of the things that we are doing is that we are trying to do, would I call it, industry fellowship, to encourage these people to do what they call voluntary internal self-regulation by joining, for example, associations. And some of these associations in Uganda now include the one that I really strongly belong to, the Editors Guild. We have encouraged the guys running online to come and come to the Editors Guild. There is, of course, NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters. The onlines are in NAB just because the online media platforms, you have to register with UCC as a requirement. So we are encouraging them to do industry fellowship and to start what they call a voluntary industry and internal self-regulation. Because even if you didn't do it, because you know regulation is always going to be mandatory, and the structure of regulation in Uganda is that it is 100% at the moment state control. They will come and regulate you, even if you don't regulate yourself. So we are aware that there are challenges when it comes to producing quality journalism, when it comes to accountability of what you do on the online platforms, and when it comes to ethical responsibility. But we are trying to encourage the industry to self-regulate.
Thank you very much. Now, as we go back to of course, Sarah, as of our discussion, as I recall very well, you are like a freelance journalist, but then it comes to online. How does this work? And so that means you can be found on all these other platforms. How does this work? You could encourage someone here or discourage someone.
Okay, so yes, I'm a freelance journalist, but I also own an online media company. So when I was registering, when I made a decision to go to URSB and register my company, it came from my background as a freelance journalist, because I was writing all these stories mostly for international media companies. They were running in those media companies, but Ugandans were not reading them. And these stories were about Uganda, and I needed Ugandans to also read these stories. So I needed the money from these companies, from the media companies, but I also wanted my stories to reach the Ugandan in a patch where I have written the story from. I needed people in Bushenyi to read the story that I wrote about them. So the reason I went into online was to make sure that if I write a story for, let's say, Africa Women in Media, and they publish it, I would ask for the rights. After 2 weeks, I will run it on my own media company. So it was my way of sharing and ensuring that, yes, they have run it, yes, they have paid me, but has it reached the person it is supposed to reach? So yes, you may be a freelance writer, even for print, but your stories just stay there. So this is a platform where you can get your stories to reach as many people as possible. Yeah. So that's why I went into this.
So for you, you are unstoppable. You want to be like everywhere.
Yes, I will be.
That is amazing. The platform is yours. Like I mentioned, this session, I would like to spend a lot of time moving around to ensure the questions that will come from you will be the questions that will be closing these sessions. And our friends on Zoom as well, we are paying attention to you. Drop your questions, as we'll be taking some time to get to that. Remember, our focus is in pursuit of quality journalism. So online publication is what we are focusing on. The line is open. Call me right now, then I will take you
on. Thank you very much. My question is in regard to something on standards. The past 1 year, I've been working with CDC and the Ministry of Health on a project to make sure that our labs in Uganda conform to the right standards. But while we were doing that, and of course me, I was doing that work as a communications person. But one thing that I learned from the medical people is that they have standards that govern the lab, that govern what happens in the hospital and all of those kinds of things. And as the media, we have ISO standards that govern the media internationally. So do you think that on top of these organizations that say certify journalists where they have to get registered, which is still an issue of contention, do you think we can have our media houses being certified to internationally recognized standards? The question is to, I think that two gentlemen, I came in and I found he was talking. I missed, the two gentlemen, yeah. Yes, Idris and Alex.
Thank you. Mine also goes to Idris. And, we're trying to look at the favorable policies and guidelines for the online publications. And, most of the people who have these publications are struggling, What is the criteria of joining NAB? Because the last time I tried to look out for it, I was told it's actually expensive than what UCC requires me to pay.
You have a question. So it's the reason I'm moving around here.
All right. Mine goes directly to Idris and Alex and Carol. Okay, all the panel, but it's about, quality journalism comes with having enough resources to circumnavigate the challenges that go around with news gathering and investigations. And in many cases, we find that many online outlets are constrained by resources. How does Nile Post, how does Daily Monitor, how does the PML maneuver to get to that and comes out with great and impactful journalism?
Let us first answer those questions and then we will proceed. In that regard, I think you have them in order.
I think all the questions have a part to play. One was about standards in journalism. Can it be internationalized or nationalized, or can we come up with a structure that then we can have our standards recognized at a certain level? I think kind of answered this question about journalism. Journalism remains journalism. So whoever is then having a responsibility of running a platform that has to do with journalism needs to conform to those. There are known standards, both internationally and nationally. And nationally, they have to conform to the national legal laws. It's about applying the good principles and then structuring yourself in such a way that you are conforming to those checklist principles of fairness, balance, truth. I mean, those ones. International known good principles of journalism. Then number 2, somebody asked about NAB. I don't know whether they wanted to ask about how to join the online media associations or NAB. But what NAB, online media associations can be members of NAB, and they pay 200,000 as subscription fee a year. But in terms of online media associations, there are two. There are two associations of the OMPA, which I belong to, online media publishers of Uganda or something like that, OMPA. And then there's a second one called Indoja. You can belong to any of the associations which you think you are